the idea of emergency response preparation and how do you prepare teams for when they have to shift. In my own personal experiences, and you've had them too, when companies have hit the chasm, have hit the wall and they realized it, would you say that and I'm trying to like just say in another way what you've been saying and see if it's accurate, that shift from everything is peacetime to we need to shift to crisis mode and big changes needs to happen, and some of them are going to be painful, that's a very difficult shift to make.
Yeah, it's hard. In some ways, I think it's because you started later than you could have or should have. And leadership needs to have part of, I think, looking forward is anticipating a lot of things in IT particularly, but a lot of things in other spaces too. But a lot of the job is anticipating. And if people are in a mode where they're like just taking their orders and executing week by week, they're not thinking and they're not looking at the long range radar. Leadership, managers and leaders particularly, they really need to, because especially organizationally, if you're kind of in a business or market space and a thing's working, and sometimes there's this, we know we need to make these adjustments, but they undervalue the effort required. And one of the reasons change is hard in organizations start making those changes earlier is because it means people got to give up to some level what they built their success on, especially if someone's been at an organization for a long period of time. And that's fair. That can be hard. But leadership has got to start recognizing that's a dynamic in play, and you've got to start figuring out how to help them shift. And that's kind of where you're really talking about internal work with people. Leaders, individuals are big like stakeholders and pieces of organizations in functional areas, because you got to prepare them for a different future, but you need to be able to say, here's how you can be successful. This is going to be good for you because new opportunity, new abilities, different type or new type of success for you. And sometimes people aren't that interested if they're really late in their career, but most people are really, if they have a curiosity and any sense of adventure, if they feel like it's safe to do so and doesn't put them in jeopardy, they will do that. So I think a leader's job, and part of what I think community building is for leaders, is creating safety for change. And not just the vision and not just forcing it to happen, but ideally you want to put a vision out there. You are actually creating the runway where the people you need to make that change happen start moving somewhat on their own with some direction from you. Where when people are late in this and the chasm's coming and they just got to make a hard left, it's just bodies start flying out of the car. And there's just consequences. And leaders will get, sometimes people do this, especially senior leaders, they will get their next promotion because they got the job done, but nobody's taking a body count. I think about those people would have been so great to have in your future, but now they're just collateral damage. And that's where sometimes business can take a very, transactional mindset around people. They're just, it's expense, it's a cost center, it's whatever, and we've got to make this look better, and we need different type of people. So I don't want to take 3 years to train some guy. Let's just go hire a guy. But there's problems with just taking people off the street, even if they're smart, especially if you get a designed and healthy culture. It takes time to assimilate because they're humans. Nobody joins a new tribe and becomes chief the next day. There's pieces to it that don't often get attended to in a lot of business practice.
You've talked about hero culture, Bo, before. So
people bubble up as a result of that. I like that term, by the way. Nobody joins a new tribe and becomes chief the next day. I like that a lot. Hero culture is, I think, an important point, actually. I'm curious, because I think it's an inevitable sort of reality in an environment where things aren't happening. A few personalities will bubble up.
Yep.
Curious what your thoughts are there.
I think the chaos environment, when they're in crisis and half on fire, those heroes show up because you need one of those. You need a problem for a hero. So it's not always, and they will get elevated and they'll become the example. And not that there aren't great things that can happen with heroes that show up to fix things, but oftentimes heroes aren't looking to de-escalate and now share the glory and get other people enabled. They're often like looking for their next fire. And I was in a situation once where someone was looking for promotion and I was asked my opinion and I kind of gave it and I was like, great guy, great skills, but they kind of want to be the guy all the time. Might have been great for solving a problem, and not that he shouldn't have been part of the thing, but the team play was not high. And of course, they got promoted, problems ensued, and I was kind of like, told you. I didn't literally say it, but I was thinking it. And, part of it is being sensitive to not stop thinking just about a person and what they can do around a specific thing, because you are in a system. Everybody in that system is being influenced by everything around them. And so when you put people in play like that, you've got to kind of decide what you want a result to be. I mean, in some situations, you just want that guy. You need to pull somebody out of a fire, and that's what you do. But you need to not just to think, oh, that's success and move on. Let's do that again. That's not the right pattern for long-term sustainability. And I think sustainability is another thing I've been latching on to lately, because a lot of what we do in organizations isn't really very sustainable, whether it be team operations or whatever, but we are very outcome focused, not sustainability focused. And sometimes that's an okay decision and a trade-off that's okay, but if that becomes your operating rhythm where sustainability is never considered, I think you end up with chasm-esque problems.
Yeah. So what would you recommend to, what are the key leadership strategies that you would recommend to leaders who are potentially in the chasm in dealing with these issues, or at least becoming aware of them?
I think things that help. One is I think leaders need to continually be learning. And I think that's a challenge sometimes for leaders because they're in a spot where they feel like I'm supposed to already know everything I need to know. So I think maintaining a learning posture to help you continue to create awareness and limit your blind spots is important. I also think there's an issue in most leadership positions. There's just a lot of isolation. And I think finding other people to connect to that can relate to your particular set of issues and challenges emotionally and otherwise is important. But often, and some people are of the mindset, that's just kind of the school of hard knocks. You get through it and if you survive it. I was actually listening to a podcast this week where there was a movement by some leaders, like once they've achieved success, they pull the ladder. This is what the guy described as they pulled the ladder up behind them. They were not going to share what they've learned, the success they had, versus building escalators, which was the other side of the metaphor. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So I think leadership's having the ability to think about taking what they're learning and going through and making it beneficial to a larger group is an interesting concept. But that's not usually the first order of business when you've got a board breathing down your neck or shareholders. But I think people that can have the capacity to widen their interpretation of that role a little bit will actually find those skills will benefit them in the day-to-day demands, but also I think in being better prepared so they're not caught off guard. Because once you're over the chasm, you're just gonna have to deal with it. But I think preventative medicine is good in this topic.
So inherent in some of what you're saying, and tell me if you disagree, but I think a piece of what I'm hearing is coming back to that notion of control and how much of that, especially if you're an executive, it feels good to talk about and try to maintain control, but a lot of it feels almost like an illusion.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we all live every day with some form of illusion. Like I'm going to get in my car, drive home, and that'll make it. There's no benefit to me assuming I won't. But and I think in organizations, there can be kind of this, I don't know, sometimes it's just a myopic issue, or a kind of believing your own marketing sometimes. And it's not that it's bad. You need to have a vision. You need to believe in what you're doing. You need to communicate that to your organization. But I think sometimes it gets to the point where people don't leave themselves open to the idea that I'm going to learn some new things too. I'm not going to have all this figured out. And actually, especially I think when leaders put out a plan, they want to execute it. There's the ability to kind of fail and learn and adapt they're not given a lot of permission to do that. And even inside organizations, when we do planning for an annual operating plan, or if you're in a safe or agile environment and you're making commitments for program increments or whatever, and teams, the expectation is you just hit all your marks. Mm-hmm. But the reality is there's emergent stuff that comes up. Technology-wise, there's emergent work that pops up. We've all seen it. I think people-wise, there's emergent work. But we often don't allow for that. I've never been in a management meeting where someone said, hey, I had some changes come up this week, some emergent emotional needs with my team. Nobody says that. And I wouldn't probably put that on the agenda that way. But as a leader, I'd want to be sensitive to there's something up with that person. I need to have a follow-up conversation. Make sure that they're good to stick with what their role is and their responsibilities are to the team and see if they need something. And that's just taking care of people so that they can perform well in the job you're needing them to do. It's just a two-sided equation. There was a Mark Cuban quote I came across recently he basically was like leadership for him was two parts. One is you've got to have the vision. The second part is you got to get to know your people and what's important to them so that you can integrate it. And I thought that was a great definition of that. And sometimes we're weak on the second. And Mark Cuban's not a soft teddy bear. He's, so for the fact that he recognized it, I was like, okay, he gets that. That's probably partly why it works for him.
If you've loved this conversation like we have, definitely reach out to Alan at offlinecoaching.io. And you're on LinkedIn as well, so people can find you there. Awesome conversation. I think the people element of the hidden chasm is something we're just starting to scratch the surface of. And it's just as important as the financials and technical debt and all of these other elements that I think we've been chatting about. So thank you, Alan.
Very good.
Tune in again for another episode soon. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.